Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG, here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I am going to be talking about Zendikar Rising and giving you my thoughts on the product as a whole. Now, for those of you who have seen any of my other past set reviews, this one is going to be a little bit different. In the past, I've broken down each set into a couple of different categories that kind of remained consistent. Whether I was talking about Throne of Eldraine or Core Set 2021, I kind of talked about the same points, and oftentimes that led to some, points like limited fun being very vague and similar, and it just wasn't fun to watch or fun for me to create. So I'm going to change how I'm doing reviews. I am no longer just going to say, here are some basic details of the set and kind of give you a little bit of a thought on it. Instead, I'm only going to talk about the things that I want to talk about. So while in this set review I may talk more specifically about mechanics and the future of Magic in that way, in a future set I may talk more about the limited environment where it's more fun. So if I don't talk about something about the set, it's pretty much because it's either not fun to talk about or my thoughts on it are pretty much just meh. So why don't we actually move into the review? So the first thing I really want to talk about is mechanics, and generally mechanics are what kind of defines a set. It's one of those things that you will really remember afterwards, and in this set we kind of had four major mechanics. We had Party, Kicker, Landfall, and Modal double-faced cards. Now, let's go with some of the more boring ones. Kicker. I think that Kicker was interesting, but it's just kind of this added thing on a card, which I think is great for a mechanic. I think that some of the best mechanics are just this little thing added on top of a card, not just something very broad. But they did a little bit more Kicker as a mechanic, which the last time we did Kicker back in Dominaria really wasn't the case. So that'll be interesting to see how that forms into a deck. Maybe it does form into something in Standard, or maybe even in Historic, where we do have access to a couple more Kicker cards. Generally, I think that it was implemented okay. Similarly, Landfall, I think it was much more interesting than Kicker, but in a standard full of land dump, it just kind of concerns me for the future, just because of how powerful dumping a bunch of land on the battlefield can be right now. But overall, they're pretty basic, and it's a mechanic. It's one of those mechanics that is very much just a kind of descriptor. It's not actually a mechanic. It's just a descriptor of when a land enters the battlefield, if that makes any sense. It's very similar to Addendum in that way, but I think it's done a lot better than Addendum. I'm not trying to hate on Landfall here. I'm just trying to say that it was very, okay, because we've seen lots of when a land enters the battlefield do X in the past couple of sets, so I feel like that kind of took away from the Landfall of Zendikar, but generally I still think it was interesting. Now, then we're kind of left with two new mechanics, and one of them is Party. I think that Party's a really interesting mechanic that wasn't given enough payoffs to be good. I think that there are going to be people who try and build party decks, and that you're going to go through all of this work to try and get either a full party or a decent sized party, and you're going to end up just not getting a good payoff. And so what Party is, by the way, is essentially you have to have one rogue, one warrior, one wizard, and one cleric. And you have to have basically 4 different creatures on the battlefield, and then cards will reference it. So there might be a card that says draw a card for each creature in your party, which I don't believe there was actually, but there are some interesting payoffs, but generally they're not that great. And they're just utility cards that give you a bonus with Party. So you get a bunch of utility cards and a bunch of random creatures that you kind of have to have somehow meet, and then the utility cards really aren't going to win you the game. So I think that's one of the issues Party's going to face. I think it could be some interesting, form an interesting jank deck, but one of the issues with Party is that it is so self-contained. It's not like Kicker or Landfall where you can kind of throw it into another deck and it works okay. It is definitely something that you have to build around, which is fine, but I don't expect it to be super powerful. Now, modal double-faced cards, I think, are the most interesting, quote, mechanic of the set. And I am going to define them as a mechanic because I do think it is a key part of it. I think that this is probably one of the biggest changes in Magic we've seen in a very long time. And if you guys don't know, double-faced cards, modal double-faced cards, I should say, have been already confirmed to be in Kaldheim and Strixhaven, the next 2 standard sets. In Kaldheim, we are finishing the Pathway cycle, and then we don't know about anything else. It was also hinted that one of those will have cards with mana cost on both sides, so we'll have to see what that kind of looks like, but I think that the power level of them has started kind of low in terms of the card on the left, is not as great. The card on the right is not as great. Together, they make a pretty good card. But I expect as we move forward to see cards that are really good on the left side, maybe mad on the right side, and then we have an amazing card. And then maybe we get a card that's really great on both sides, and just I expect the power level to kind of ramp up. I think this was a first little introduction. They made all the lands enter tapped except for the Bolt lands at the Mythic slot. And I think that this is a kind of test run. And we're going to see that if these do well, which I think that at first people are going to underestimate them, and then they're going to realize, hey, maybe I just throw out 2 planes in my decks and replace them with a modal card, and then gives me this extra spell that I can draw. And it's almost like having cycling on your land. And so I think that the power level has started here, and it will go up and rise. Maybe we get multicolored lands, maybe we do lots of other little interesting things, but I think that this is probably one of the most, quote, innovative mechanics in terms of shaping the future of the game. I would not be surprised if modal double face cards become a very regular thing that we see in sets. Maybe not as much as Zendikar, where every single booster has a modal double face card, but I do think that in the future we will see a decent amount of them. And yeah, this is probably the topic I am the most interested in about Zendikar Rising, in terms of, is this them saying, hey, we want to somewhat adjust the land problem? Do we want to make it so that choices are a bigger part of the game? Because in the past, they have said, being mana flooded or mana screwed is awful. Choices in the game are what's most important. Dynamic deck building and being able to know how to pilot your deck is important. And this kind of does all of that. It means that when you copy a deck off the internet, it's not as easy as just copy. You have to know, what side am I going to play more often? It's more of a play decision. That's why modal spells are so great. It's kind of just a modal spell. And it also allows for deck building to be almost harder and easier at the same time. So I think it just adds so much to the game for them to only do it in 3 sets and leave it. And obviously, only do it in 3 sets is a bit of an exaggeration, as, it's been a while since we've had things that go over sets like that. Ever since they've abandoned blocks, they really haven't done themes that arch over sets, but they've kind of talked about how they're wanting to do that, and I think that's really great. But going back to Zendikar Rising, I think the modal double face cards are probably the best part of it. It's fun for most formats. It's a card that feels good when you put it in a deck, because you're like, yes, this is I don't feel bad. I'm not cutting a land to add this. It is just a land that has a little bit of an upside. And then obviously the dual lands are, I think, better than most people are talking about, but I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. So then I want to talk about the power level. I think the power level of this set was generally decreased. If we were to look at say the previous fall set, Throne of Eldraine, I would say that Throne of Eldraine has many more power cards that have become staples, like Murderous Rider, things like that. And I think that, there are a lot of parallels between Throne of Eldraine and Zendikar Rising. They both have cards that allow you to play one side as one type of creature, or, one creature or something, and then the other side is like an instant or sorcery. They both have this feeling of adventure and all of that, and so they are very similar. But I think that Zendikar Rising is the first set in a stage of powering down the game. I think that there are some very powerful cards that will make an impact in the game, and that's okay. There's allowed to be powerful cards in the game, but I don't think there are many, if any, I would say, broken cards by nature. Now, in combination with other cards, say Lotus Cobra, that may become insane, but I think that this was a nice little power down. Now, this could be similar to what I would say Theros Beyond Death was, but then again, that had Uro in it. But outside of Uro, really, Theros Beyond Death I considered to be one of the more boring sets. But what's interesting about Zendikar Rising is that it's not a boring set, it's just a less powerful one. And I don't know if I'm the only one feeling that. Obviously, maybe when I looked at the cards, I just didn't see the power in them. It just really felt like it is less powerful. And I don't think that doesn't mean there are good cards. There are good cards, there are just no broken cards, which I think is a step in the right direction. And I just want to talk about fun cards. Are the cards fun? Are they just boring? Are they so powered down that they're boring? Because, when you look at people in the community, there are a ton of different people who want different things. There are some people who just want cards that fit in the archetypes of decks they like. There are people who want the game to be more powerful because it means that there's more interesting, complex gameplay. But then there are some people who want the game to be so basic that it's essentially vanilla creatures swinging at each other. And I think that going to an extreme where turn 2 kills are not that uncommon, or going to an extreme where games essentially feel like limited, neither of those are good. We kind of need to meet in the middle. And I think that maybe Magic right now is leaning towards a little bit too powerful, having cards being banned out of Eternal formats that generally don't see bans. The companion mechanic, all of these have bent towards the more powerful side. But I think that when we see people saying that, even this set is overpowered, I think that what we really need to look at is how fun are the cards, because that's the kind of player I am. I want to have fun playing Magic. I'm not here to win the game. I mean, I'm there to win the game, but that's not my first priority. I just want to have fun. And so cards like Angel of Destiny, Ashaya, and Morag are all really interesting cards that, yes, some of them may be powerful, but they're just cards that when I saw them, I was like, ooh, I wonder what I could do with that. What other cards does this work with? And I think that that is something that is so essential to Magic, that the fact that there are so many cards in here that are interesting in that way really speaks to the success of the set, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about Limited. Now, I'm not really going to talk about Limited a lot in this review. I did a whole video covering it where I kind of talked about the themes and a little bit of my thoughts, but it's kind of hard to tell before the set has been released for, more than a week. So I'm going to point you over to that video so you guys can check out my thoughts over there. And then on top of that, the commander decks, I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to point you over to my commander deck review. My kind of summary of it is that it's interesting and it's like $25. It's nice to see things like Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, and the Ravnica Signets in a product that comes out with every set. But the commanders are a bit weak, but overall it's a good product for new players. So that's kind of my overview. But if you want to hear my more in-depth detailed, there will be a link in the description where you can see my detail or my thoughts more on that. Similar, by the way, there'll also be a link for the Limited video. And then I want to talk about the future of the game. So, in terms of the future of the game, do I think Zendikar Rising is going to have a major impact on the game forever? I mean, how I wrote the question in the script is Zendikar Rising going to change the future of the game forever? And I think that almost every set does. It teaches Wizards of the Coast new things. Every set impacts the future of Magic, obviously, but I think that the modal double-face cards in Zendikar Rising is one of the most impactful things that we have seen in a very long time. I mean, think about it. We are seeing something that could theoretically change the game forever. What if we start seeing more, what if we start shifting into a stage where there are more and more of these double-faced cards, which, by the way, does kind of point towards a digital gameplay experience, because these modal double-faced cards, as they get more complex, are going to be harder and harder to play in paper. Of course, I'm not trying to say Wizards of the Coast is trying to phase out paper, because why would they do that? They already make so much money off of it, but I think that if these modal double-face cards go well, it could very easily change how the game will be played in the future. So if in 5 years from now we're all playing with almost all double-face cards, that would not surprise me. Of course, that could be exaggeration, but it honestly isn't that surprising, and I think that these modal double-face cards are just one step in a big kind of evolution for Magic, because Magic is a very old game, and if it wants to continue to thrive, I feel like it does need to evolve, and this may be the way it does it. I personally love modal double-face cards. I know some people who hate them, again, let me know what you guys think about modal double-face cards in the comments down below. Now, I want to talk about it compared to previous sets, and this will be my last topic. I think that the cards are more fun than the ones from Core Set 2021, but less impactful. I mean, this might be showing a power down of Standard, like I said before, and it at least seems to be the least powerful set this year, which some people will say it's good, some people will say it's bad. I think that it's probably a good thing that we're slowly powering it down. Now, does that mean it's going to sell less? Maybe, but generally it's full of fun cards, it has a decent limited environment, and just overall it is a pretty good product. And I know I didn't talk about lore in this video because it's not something I'm super passionate about, but but they also managed to appease people by returning to the digital storybooks or digital story articles instead of books. And we did see a Fetchland reprint technically. So I think that this set has done a lot for Magic the Gathering, and if I were to give it like a good, bad, great, I would say it's probably pretty close to a perfect set. I mean, obviously there's no such thing as a perfect set, and of course this is a subjective opinion. But I think Zendikar Rising was crafted wonderfully. The new commander decks are a great improvement over Planeswalker decks. There are very few things I feel like I can complain about, except for the fact that maybe we just got a Landfall-based set after a standard full of land dump meta. Other than that, and that technically has nothing to do with the set, it's more just the set the standard it's being dropped into. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I want to know what you guys think about Zendikar Rising in the comments down below. If you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more awesome content like this, hit that subscribe button. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.